Okay, now let's jump into a quick code example so you can see all of these pieces working together. This simple app is the obligatory Hello World app with a small addition to get you started using some Google App Engine APIs. Now, the first file we will look at is the build.xml file that is used to configure Apache AMP. As I mentioned, I do have some documentation that covers all of this in greater detail, so I'll keep this discussion on the video brief, and you can refer to the documentation for the details. Now, inside of this build.xml file, I've defined a few different targets, which are the commands that AMP will be able to run at the command line. The copy jars target copies the jars that this app will need to the lib directory, namely the App Engine jars and the Scala jars. Now you can see up here we've defined the lib directory as war/webinf/lib as Google App Engine expects. Likewise, the build directory, the source directory, and so on. The compile target will copy all of the .scala files in the project's source directory into the build directory, copying over any other files that might exist without compiling them. By making the compile target depend on the copy jars target, you will ensure that the jars in the lib directory are the most up-to-date copy you have installed before compiling your code. For example, if you update them for a new version or something along those lines. Now you can see that the compile target also depends on the init target. Now, the init target sets up dependencies for using Scala with ANT and is therefore required for this project. Finally, the run server target first executes the compiled target and then starts up the development server on port 8888. The next file to examine is the deployment descriptor file. This is where you map the routes of your app to specific URLs and place authentication restrictions on certain URLs within your app. You can see here that we have one servlet named Hello World mapped to the URL /Hello World, and that we have included this servlet on the welcome file list. This means that this servlet will be displayed when users visit the root URL of your app. Next, we have the App Engine config file. For this demo app, this file really has no meaningful information, but this is where you would put your app's registered ID and version number. The thread safe parameter tells Google App Engine whether or not to allow concurrent requests for your app. You can also set things like which files are resource files, which files are static files, set cache timeouts for your static files, and much more. Now, the servlet for this code is quite simple, but this is where the small addition comes in. The servlet uses the Google Users service to allow users to sign in with a Google account. Once they have signed in, the app displays a simple welcome message on their screen.